What's up, guys? Chef Pete here with his accented palate. Today's episode's gonna be about quiche. Quiche 3 ways. Let's get started. We're gonna make a delicious pie dough the easiest way possible, using a food processor. My preference is an all-butter pie dough. I know some people like to make it with lard, it tastes too animally for me, or like to make it with shortening, which I just don't like at all. So I will stick with butter. Precisely 1 stick of it. I know, bad pun. After the dough starts coming together in a food processor, turn it out to a board, form it into a disc, wrap it in plastic wrap, and let it chill in the fridge for about 30 minutes. And now we are ready to roll. Another cheesy pun, I know. Keep turning the dough a quarter turn to keep it nice and even. Now let's talk about tart pans. You have 2 ways to go. You can make one large quiche, or you can make several small quiches with these mini tart pans. I've found these on Amazon for about 15-16 bucks, and I highly recommend them. I think it's a really fun way to, everybody can have their own individual quiches. I'll be sure to include the link in the description. Now let's get back to our dough. The best way to do this is to place the tart pan on top of your dough so we can see the exact outline that where we need to cut. Obviously, you want to account for the walls of the tart pan plus some overhang because the dough tends to shrink in the oven and we don't want that. Loosely place your dough circle into the pan, making sure not putting too much pressure on the sides so dough will not get caught. And after using another piece of dough, and then just gently push the sides up with that piece of dough so it can form to the pan. Alright Pete, let's speed things up. I don't have all day to watch you playing with dough. Well, let's do it. While you're preparing the rest of the ingredients, let that dough chill in the fridge for about 30 minutes. We don't want all that delicious butter just to melt out in the oven. Now let's make the custard. What makes a quiche? A quiche, other than the cheese of course. Eggs. Let's start with 4 of them. I will use a Pyrex instead of a bowl to make the custard because I think it's much easier to pour it into the molds after when you're done. You'll see. You can also make quiche with just milk and skipping the heavy cream, but to be honest, the texture is so much more luxurious and silky if you do use just a little bit of heavy cream in it. Pop it into the fridge, and now let's get back to our nicely chilled pie crust. Before we can bake them in the oven, we need to fork the bottom so it's not gonna puff off. But since we are making mini quiches, might as well use a mini fork. Yeah, I know, this episode is full of corny jokes. Before we can put them into the oven, we need to weigh them down. The best way to do this is use a piece of parchment paper, crumble them up really well so it can fit into the mold easier, and add some pie weights. You can buy some fancy ones online or at a kitchen supply store, but in my case I went with the easier route. One time I had an expired bag of lentils and since then I'm keep using it, probably a couple of years now. And now we're gonna parbake them for about 15 minutes. Now let's do the fun part, the fillings. We're gonna do 3 different kinds. One vegetarian, one with fish and one with meat. All from ingredients that can be found in your fridge, and it doesn't require any pre-cooking, like smoked salmon and dill, artichokes, sun-dried tomatoes and black olives, or one of my favorites, which is chorizo, potato chips, yes, you heard it right, and some goat cheese and red peppers. Now let's get cooking. First up is my bagel-inspired quiche. Smoked salmon, fresh dill, chopped shallots, and a little bit of Gruyere cheese. It is absolutely delicious. Even though these flavors are so New York City, the memories for me actually takes me back to Paris, where I had my first salmon quiche about 15 years ago. Still probably the best quiche I have ever had. Now let's travel to Spain. One of my favorite Spanish dishes is a tortilla, which is basically a potato and egg omelette, cooked in a pan, which is very similar to quiche. My other favorite foods from Spain is a dry-cured chorizo sausage with all the delicious smoked paprika in it. And goat cheese. You cannot beat Spanish goat cheese. Spanish tortilla is traditionally made with potatoes that are fried in olive oil. But one time I read a version from Ferran Adrià, probably one of the best chefs in the world, that just used potato chips. So this is an inspiration by him to do this dish like this. The taste of Spain as a mini quiche. And finally, our last stop is an Italian-inspired vegetarian quiche with sun-dried tomatoes, olives, and grilled artichoke hearts with some Parmesan cheese. I prefer the sun-dried tomatoes that are actually packed in olive oil instead of just dried in a bag. I think the texture is better. I also prefer olives that are actually oil cured versus the one in the brine because they're less vinegary and I think it tastes better in this dish. And if you're lucky, you can find some grilled artichoke hearts already in a jar, but if not, you can just use a regular one too. And don't be shy with the Parmesan cheese. It adds a beautiful nuttiness to the whole dish. And after a 30-minute trip to a 350-degree oven, there you have it, folks. Quiche 3 ways. Unmolding the quiche from these mini tart pans couldn't be easier. Just turn a little bowl over, put the quiche on top, and the sides will just fall off. Then just lift it off of the base plate. Serve them warm or room temperature. If you make this for your next dinner party, they're sure to be a crowd favorite. Now that we have been running around in the kitchen for a good part of the day to make these delicious quiches to our guests, it's time to sit down, slow down, and enjoy. Champagne and eggs are made for each other. So for a quiche, probably the best cocktail is a French 75. I will include the recipe at the end of this video. And don't forget to subscribe. See you guys next week.